treating it like a threat. And one of the things that can't be attacked is your self-custody Bitcoin. And one of the things that can be attacked is the ETF. You can't be exposed to that. That's my view. It's not a good idea. And by the way, that'll hit MSTR too. It'll probably hit other stuff as well.
Friends and enemies, welcome back. Canadian Bitcoiners podcast.
Friends and enemies, welcome to the CBP. Wanna be better informed? Listen to Len and Joey. Sponsors taken care of right off the top. Bull, Bitcoin, and easy DNS. The media is feeding the slop. It doesn't matter what topics discussed. Quality entertainment and information you can trust.
That's being planned or at least discussed. You know, we're not going to allow
quality entertainment and information you can trust. Send the guy some value, boost them with some stats. Bitcoin is a scarcity asset. I mean, it's just a fact. Geopolitical, national, down to the local cloud.
Friends and enemies, welcome back. Are you ready to talk about the baby boomers tonight? Joe Barbuto is back, Economic Longwave. The baby boomers, they got it real good, okay? They had it good. They got it good. I want you to think about the run these guys had, okay? Some of them started off life winning a world war. Decent, pretty good, okay? Beat Russia in the Summit Series in Canada. Not bad, 2 for 2. Went to the moon. Pretty good. You like that? Woodstock, the Beatles, Zeppelin, the Stones. Amazing times. They had the best drugs for sure. I don't know if our guest has anything to say about that. I'm not going to ask him. But meanwhile, the Millennials and the Zoomers and I guess Gen Alpha, is that what they call the kids who are on TikTok all day? I'm not sure. But we are getting the short end of the stick in a lot of ways. But fear not, my friends. Chickens are coming home to roost for our gray-haired friends and neighbors. We'll talk about all that stuff. We're happy to have Joe back. First, the sponsors. EasyDNS, best place for you to buy, host, register, all those good things, a domain. Mark has been a friend of the show for a long time. Mark is the co-founder of EasyDNS and the lead man now, the man in the throne, as it were. Whether or not you're a Bitcoiner, they have something for you, guaranteed, okay? So you're looking to have a secure platform to run your business, run your online store, run your blog, run your website, run your podcast, maybe. Easy mail and domain share. Make sure that all your information always rock solid, behind a vault, never out there for people. Never worry about being spoofed by some other guy hosting a domain similar to yours. Mark will catch that for you, no problem. He's got everything there for you over at EasyDNS. If you're a Bitcoiner, virtual private server stuff like Nostr relays, Bitcoin nodes, BTC Pay server, if you want to do that. I mean, Bitcoin's up. Why wouldn't you want to take Bitcoin for payment? We would if we had the opportunity. So these things are all important to you. Use EasyDNS for all your registrar needs. CBP Media is the code. You get 50% off first round of buys. You can't beat that. We like that a lot. And then, of course, Bull Bitcoin, which is the best place to host your content, the best place to buy Bitcoin. I was talking to the Bull Bitcoin guys today, and I always say how they're an extreme group of guys. And I won't say who posted the meme, but there was a meme about the stages of Bitcoin. It was all Francis, and it was the original like baby Francis with the tie on. And then it was like semi-older, like a couple years older Francis with the Bull Bitcoin hat. Then it was Francis on stage saying he's in Bitcoin to destroy governments, you know, with his military vest on. And then the last stage of Bitcoin, the fourth one, was a guy with a shaved head and a Bull Bitcoin tattoo being put on his scalp. The team is so extreme that I actually asked the guys if that was Francis. I didn't know. I still don't know for sure. There's claims that it's not, but nothing would surprise me. And when you have an extreme team like that, what do you get? You get a great product. Whether it's the bill system where you can pay your bills with Bitcoin, whether it's the non-custodial features, whether it's the security, whether it's the low fees, all those good things are only possible with the good guys over at Bull, guys and gals at Bull. Use our promo code CBP. I think it's CBP, 25% off your fees for life. Can't beat that. And we know you guys are using it because there's a ton of volume going through there. Joseph, good to see you again. I got to say, not often does a guy message me immediately after being on the show and say, we got to do it again. But when you told me that you wanted to put yourself and your peers in the line of fire, I mean, how could I resist? It's impossible to say no to that. What's going on, buddy? Good to see you again.
Yeah. Great to see you too, man. This is, I think I wanted to address it because there's a lot of, let's blame the baby boomers, right? And I'm one of those. who's born, just if you look at the demographics at the peak, just before we started the decline. So, is it the baby boomers' fault, or is this just another cycle, or is it the fault of extrapolative economics? And really, we'll get into wherever direction you want to go. I'm open to it, right? Take shots, whatever. I'll try to answer, defend them, or criticize them. But I think the whole thing about why I got involved in this Longwave, it was trying to figure out, what happened to me, as I've mentioned many times. But the clarity and what I realize is it's the fault of how we're hardwired, is to think whatever is happening or occurring today, we extrapolate that. And that's why we repeat these bubbles and these social cycles. And what I follow and what I realized when I was looking for a timing model, when I was an investment advisor, actually, I discovered that this is a social cycle. We're just repeating history. And I always find that the criticisms of any of the forecasts are always the same. It's this time, it's different. They won't let it happen. It can't happen, yada, yada, yada. But we just saw what happened with Greece and the United States 10, 15 years ago. And what surprised people like myself who studied history is that we kept going. Australia, China, the three amigos, as I called it in Canada, just kept rising until we got this blow off in 2022, which is scary. I just think that, and I'll leave it, the majority of baby boomers are ignorant, as are most people, of what's coming. They think that their asset values are permanent. And this is, from my perspective, as one boomer to other boomers, maybe you should think about selling, maybe, because you're going to get hurt the most, and you will be able to recover.
So there's a couple of things I want to talk about. I've done a bit of research for this show, more than I would normally do, I'll be honest with you, because I want to talk to you about some of the things that people in my generation, I think, to your point, Joe, they hold against the boomers, but I'm not sure they should. I've said on this air many times that there's things you should hate the boomers for. The things they continue to do in the face of evidence that they're destroying the generation after them, the generations after them. Hate them for that. But I think I've also said on the show, don't hate them for following what the incentives told them to do, 30, 40 years ago, told them to do 10 or 12 years ago, and continue, honestly, to tell them to do now in a lot of ways. The one thing maybe we should start with is, you mentioned it there, sell because things are going to get hard. According to some data, this is hard data to find, but 1 in 5 Canadian baby boomers, so between 55 and 64 years old, have no retirement savings, while half of the baby boomers in the same demo have less than $5,000. The median is about $800,000, but still, like that, those numbers are crazy. So maybe we start with this. Do the boomers really have it as good as people my age think they have it?
I think that it's a much smaller majority than people think. Let me tell you why. One of the things that surprised me when I started the investment business a long time ago, and your financial planners, like, you start looking at the books. You have to see their cash flow, their assets and liability. And what became very evident was, oh my God, here it is. Everybody's thinking they had this beautiful car, beautiful home, but they were levered. And I left in 2012. So I don't think if I looked and any financial planner was honest with you, that they would tell that the leverage is crazy. And the problem is that a lot of baby boomer parents probably helped out their kids by leveraging and putting their name on it, and they don't realize they're on the hook for this real estate bubble. So did they have it good? Yes, because they were all born. Remember, Trump, Stallone, I'm just using the names, are at the leading edge, right? They're born in 46. So they've only seen an upwave. Mm-hmm. And but what happens with this is that if you ask them what they think about investments and savings, it would be radically different from somebody who was born 10 years earlier, like my parents. They were born into poverty in the Great Depression, and they were frugal and lived within their means and never thought of leverage. So it's really there's a great book, if you read The Fourth Turning, that explains these generational cycles, which are about 21 years. And the thinking is always, again, when you were born and what your experience is, you assume and you extrapolate that. Now, from a baby boomer's perspective, who studied history, we just saw progress. And yeah, if you were born in 1946 up until the early 80s, you saw progress with technology. There was no talk about real estate as an investment. It was a place to live, and prices stayed within a mean of 2 to 4 times income. That whole rise in real estate values from 49 till 89 was based on 46 to 89 was based on fundamentals. And in Elliott wave terms, if you haven't studied, this was the strongest and the real rise in real estate. But basically, we were seeing cars, air conditioning, air flight, going to the moon. We were seeing technology changing us, right? And that's what drives these long waves too. But something changed in the 90s. And when we had the first bubble that broke, we saw the financialization, right? We saw REITs, we saw the banks get involved, we saw HELOCs, we just saw all things that we financialized. And so in Elliott wave terms and long wave terms, or the long wave, it's called the monetary wave, is that what drives asset values are not fundamentals, but financialization. And the blow off came from the lowest interest rates in history. So it was a perfect 1, 2, 3, 5. I'm 90 to 2022, that whole real estate cycle. Because if you look at the data, the leveraging started in 1946 when modern day mortgages came into effect, and gross debt service ratio was only 26%. And it was only males at the time that could afford a home. That's why homes were 1.5 to 2 times income. And in Toronto, they went to 18 in 2022. And you say, how is that mathematically possible? And I'm going to say the ignorant comments are population, immigration. But if you look at the data, and I presented to people, population growth has been slowing dramatically. And I posted something today regarding real estate, that the birth death cycle will be turning negative. And if it wasn't for the massive immigration, it would have already gone negative. And so far, year to date, it is. So, and what people aren't paying attention to is the deaths are growing exponentially. This is supply. And this is one of the reasons Japan took so long to recover. So, if you want to ignore that reality, that's a choice, but it's supply. We keep talking about immigration, but the workforce is shrinking, the birth deaths is collapsing. And I haven't posted it, but I'll post it maybe tomorrow, that if you look at deaths in Canada, and I put an exponential trend line, in 2016, the actual deaths is growing now exponentially. It's moving away from that. And this is going to put supply into the market into the future. And what does this mean? It's just totally will shift real estate as an investment mentality. And I think that's going to take at least 1 or 2 decades to completely eliminate. I think we're going to see, the cycles are pointing down to 2027 to 29. Then we should get a rally, and then we get another downturn in real estate prices, because interest rates are trying to normalize, which is going to put downward pressure on the ability of people to leverage. So they're ignorant. And I'm, as a baby boomer, am only aware because of what my experience, and I just fell into understanding how things work. But to my own family member and a friend I know very well who's been in the mortgage business for 30 years and somebody else who's very wealthy, I remember in 2022, oh, real estate was correct, but it will never go down. And they don't want to hear the truth. Now I know, but the truth is all three of them should be okay because they don't have leverage. I do know that. But the thing is that they have this belief because they have this, we're hardwired to think linear, and they don't see the cycles are now all turning against real estate as an investment. So it's just plain ignorance. And once the panic hit, we're really going to see the selling. One more thing I want to mention. We're only seeing a deflation in assets in BC and Ontario. Most of the other Canadian markets are still rising, but they're forming their own bubbles. So if it wasn't for that, the Canadian index would have been collapsing by now. And it's really only represented in BC's. But once the rest of the country follows, we're seeing a bubble in Halifax. It's been over for 10, 15 years, and now I guess people are moving out to other places. It looks like Alberta just rolled over. So once that rolls over, it's like every other asset bubble since the tulip mania, and ends badly.
Okay,
for speculators.
So the question there for me is, if I look at the commentary around the wealth disparity between boomers and millennials, right? The millennial generation really are the kids of the boomers, not the Xers. It's us, the kids born in the late 80s. I think I'm probably like an early millennial. I was born in 87. So I don't know exactly where that puts me, but certainly not at the tail end. The thing I always hear, Joe, is that, while it has been difficult for millennials to start families, buy homes, all these things, that there's $1 trillion in wealth just in Canada coming to millennials through, the generous term I think is wealth transfers, but the term that I would use is death and destruction to the boomers, right? Like, eventually they die, or they offer inheritances, or trusts come to maturity or whatever. And that wealth goes from that generation to ours. Now, if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that the millennials might be waiting for a promise that's never fulfilled because things will just get so bad that the money's not there. Do I have that right?
Yeah. The either in Elliott wave terms, if you look at Toronto prices, or if you look at from the Longwave perspective, monetary waves are they're just phantom wealth. You're not going to hear that from anybody in the investment business. This is why a lot of us left. We just said, well, wait a sec, how are we going to save people? Because the governments are on this fiscal path to insolvency, which means interest rates are going to rise, or at least normalize, and that's going to put downward pressure on real estate. And then people are going to look at investments, and even investments here are super expensive. Listen, it's not just Canada. We're pretty good at seeing the future, but nobody would have seen the U.S. would have reinflated, and in real terms, their real estate is the most expensive in history. And cycles, they revert to the mean if actually you overshoot to the downside. And the stock market is the most expensive in history. Mm-hmm. So it's not that it's just predicated on just Canada and Canadians to Americans. This is why Buffett and a lot of value investors have a huge amount of cash in their portfolio. What I have for my models is a huge amount of cash also, and we look kind of foolish since I've made it public in the past 2 years, but we've done well because gold and Bitcoin's done really well. We have that as a defense. And we do have some allocation to the markets. Like with ETFs, I love it. I wish I would have had this choice. I'd go inverse, right? So as the market's correcting, we'll just switch the model. So we have some market exposure, but we have a lot of cash. And it's just to protect your capital. This is the lesson I learned after getting involved in the business. So it's not just tied to Canada. It's the US. It's a really bad situation. And what I'm concerned about is that we don't have the Keynesian pump into the downturn. So what are they going to do? They're going to attempt. And the change politically will not come until, I want to pause here, make sure we grasp this. So what are we looking for? We're looking for the financial crisis. It's not here yet. There's no deleveraging. Everybody's saying Canadians, a lot of people are misleading people, say Canadians are deleveraging. No, they're not. They're still leveraging. It's slowing dramatically. I think I sent you one chart of household growth that it peaked in 2022, collapsed in 2023, and it peaked last year, and it's slowing dramatically. That's going to be the telltale signs, economic winter. So economic winter, the signs are shrinking credit growth, and also Canadians are delevering. Yeah, that is a chart just so I can keep a track. So look at this closely. You could see that there's the bubble peak in 22, then it collapsed. You see both mortgage and household credit. Mm-hmm. And notice that we're getting lower lows since a year ago. So I think once the numbers, and I think it's going to continue, but because you're getting Toronto and Vancouver getting worse, and we're getting froth in the other markets. That's why it's slowing. So a lot of capital or speculators left Toronto and Vancouver, and they went to the other provinces. So once that goes negative, then that's when the deleveraging will start. And Ray Dalio talks about it in the big debt crisis. He's a baby boomer himself, and he's trying to help people. I think it should be the baby boomers should be listening the most. Yeah, unfortunately, this is part of these cycles. What can we do? We can't stop. This is why they repeat, because humans, this is what I've learned. This is why it's a social cycle, because we're just repeating the mistakes of those who thought 20s.
Do you not think that it's possible? I mean, you said this earlier in the show, and I've heard you say this before too, that the social cycle of the monetary wave, these things are intertwined in a way that a lot of people don't understand. We repeat things because it's the only understanding we have of certain environments. And when the environment shifts away from that understanding, we're caught by surprise and the rug comes out from underneath you. Now, the sort of natural response from me, I think from a lot of Bitcoiners, would be, look, if I look at what I've seen, maybe to my detriment over the last 20 years, the response is always the same. The government in the United States specifically did let 08 get away from them a little bit. But if you invested during that 08 period, you made out like a bandit in nominal terms, and probably also in real terms too, compared to inflation. And then again in 2020 and again in 2023. And then because the Federal Reserve is so political and, they may say they're not, but they are, even on the way out from the Biden administration, there was a cut from the Federal Reserve that juiced the economy even more. And so now, to your point, if we look at data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, or we look at trueflation, or we look at the real estate market over there, because there are bubbles forming in the United States as well, and there's some froth and some rolling over starting. The thing that seems to me to be the next logical step for these guys is more fiscal stimulus. And so it's another situation where asset holders, boomers, for example, who have been, according to the data, irresponsible with the opportunity they were given, they're going to be the beneficiaries yet again. Why do you think that only things that are, sort of, I don't want to say this is what you think, but it sounds to me like it's at least possible that your view is the things that repeat are often the things that hurt the most, when it seems to me that in the last 20 years, the things that keep repeating are the things that pump the bags the most. So what do you think, in terms of this idea that the next response will just be a bigger mistake than the last one, leading to a bigger income disparity, bigger wealth gap, bigger asset bubble, blah, blah, blah? Give me your take there.
This time it will, because we levered from the zero bound and governments are fiscally compromised, and they're not going to get the interest rate interest rate fall that they're looking for. Because the secular rise in rates now are the demand credit. What's the word I'm looking for? The rise in interest rates moving forward was simply and the bond market will start to see, well, wait a sec, how are you going to pay us back, right? And this is why we're not going to get a normal response. If anything, a bailout will put all levels of government in a fiscal crisis, right? So we're not going to get it. And they're fighting a trend that's leading downward into the late 2020s. I mean, you can't fight this. These cycles, occur. The most important, in my view, is of how I understand things is the monetary wave. And the monetary wave is just really simple. For people who haven't heard this in the long wave, the monetary wave is the financialization of the economy that's helped along with the price of credit falling. This only happened in the 1820s, 1870s, 1830. And when the price of credit is falling, most people don't look at how much debt they're borrowing, but they're looking at their cash flow, how much they can afford. So in 2021, Canadians, Americans, Europeans were looking at, well, look how much debt I can take because the interest rate's at zero. There's no historical precedent for this. And there's no historical precedent for governments being in some. In 1929, interest rates were at 6%, and governments were running fiscal surpluses. I mean, the whole Keynesian argument, right, in defense of Keynes was, you run deficits in bad times, and in good times you pay down your debt. Well, politicians don't want to be the bad guy, so they keep running deficits. And this is the part where the gold bugs are right, It keeps ambitious, Bob Hoy says, I think it keeps ambitious politicians in check. And people say, well, gold standard limits the ability for fiscal response. I said, but here's the problem. The opposite side is that politicians will abuse that money. And look at Trump with Powell. And if you don't know, I mean, the market has control of interest rates, not Powell. They can fire Powell. They can hire anybody they want, and the market will not listen to them. If the market feels risk in the capital, then interest rates will rise. And another point, look, the long wave, the up wave of the contractive cycle, the complete cycle, the up wave is rising real demand. We had rising interest rates from 1946 until 81, and we had the strongest economic growth in history in Canada and the US, rising rates. It kept a bubble in check, and the economy was focused on innovation and real economic growth. Falling interest rates is a sign of slowing credit demand. And I've proven that if you look at credit growth, peaked in Canada in the 1970s at double digit, 20%. And this last bubble zero, we barely topped 7%, and now it's fallen to 3%. So falling interest rates is a sign of a weakening economy, but people leverage. And this is why all this, we call it, phantom wealth. In time, it will all correct. And that sounds extreme and unbelievable. And, I get every day, I'll get people telling me, well, you're wrong in this and that. And they'll print and they'll allow 100 people, a million people in per year. We saw the mistakes. Is you have to give the economy the ability to absorb it. But when I show them the reality of population growth is still slowing, I think it's always taken back. I'm not trying to say I'm right. I'm just trying to dispel the myths, because the more we misallocate capital into real estate, the worse it becomes. Because how do we fix the other side? And this is the thing is, I'm trying to figure out, how do we fix it? We don't have the monetary bullets. We don't have the fiscal room. How many bank mergers will occur? How many, how many banks will be left after all this? Half of them, maybe? I don't know.
So what do you say to boomers who want to get out of this? I mean, it sounds to me, and I think I'm framing this correctly, that even if they wanted to fix their situation or remedy their situation somehow, because of the nature of the way the market has evolved, naturally or unnaturally over the last 30 years, they're in a position now where they have caught the bottom end of this monetary wave or the sort of beginning of the decline. And they're, as the kids say, they're cooked. So if you're a boomer, I'm looking at some data here. More and more boomers are working into their 60s. They're saying, of course, that it's because they're healthy and enjoy it. But I think anyone would tell you that the reason they work is to make money. Otherwise, they just call it volunteering. And, when I look at that data, I see it as sort of already something starting to play out. I also think it's unfair that the Zoomers and the younger crowd blame immigrants for taking low-wage jobs. While that is true, Joe, I still see a lot of pensioners at the deli when I go to the grocery store, bagging groceries. They're working on different things, painting stuff around the city. They're staying a lot longer in good jobs that would normally have turned over to younger people by now. And so if you're a boomer, let's say you have a job or you don't have a job, I don't know, what do you do? Because you can't sell and downsize. There's nowhere to go and no one to buy your house. So what's the plan? Like, what do you recommend people do in their situation now?
Oh, I just think it's just like myself. I think again, and this is not conventional thinking, but if you look at the workforce age is still shrinking, even though we had all these immigrants.
Yeah.
And I'm not fearful of AI. I think it's pretty clear that AI robotics is part of the solution. There's going to be a shortage of workers. This has never happened in history. When I first entered the workforce in my early 20s, we had almost 20% unemployment for youth. And that was simply, there were so many of us baby boomers coming into the workforce. So it was hard to find a job. I didn't understand it then as I do now. Immigration is cyclical and it'll probably go off a cliff and it'll shrink. I think the population could shrink for a year or 2 years as we get into economic winter. And we're going to need people to keep working. Remember, productivity is what gives us our standard of living, not immigrants. It was the technological boom. Last one was automobiles and oil and aeronautics. I mean, it's just changed our world. And now it's the information revolution that is still ongoing. It's the productivity, and we have to have an innovation economy. I've said, I think you heard me at the conference, that the fifth wave is totally decentralized, right? And that's exciting because all the technologies are empowering the individual, just like AI, just like the internet did, cell phones, now AI. AI empowers the individual. The governments are losing power because centralization is sclerotic. What's the only name to claim benefit for Canadians is the sick care system, and that's not sustainable. It won't be around as it is now in 10 years. Thankfully, we have this biotech revolution that's changing. It's already changing people's lives, but it's too expensive, and the cost, once it's down to $2,000 or $3,000, then that's a game changer. And that really switches the healthcare sick care model. So I think they're going to work, and we're going to need them. And as I said, but understanding history, you're going to see immigration collapse, and you're going to see the workforce continue to shrink. So we're going to need robotics and the seniors to work. Because there's going to be a shortage. I mean, the reality is that a lot of the immigrants are taking low wage jobs, and most Canadians don't want to do that job. But I think most people my age can find a job. My own wife's interesting is, even though with the immigration boom in the West, whatever, she's the short supply around the world. They can't find, and there's so much competition for her to work in different districts. So the economy is already changing. Just the two sectors I know will shrink is really the fire sector dramatically. And I've already read some people are leaving the business, right? And the size of government that will change because as it becomes decentralized, right? So those are the two areas where we're going to see shrink, but you're seeing the growth is, and the reason that the fire sector, after this rolls over, is going to shrink is that what is their product, right? Credit. And their product became cheaper for 40 years. And we had the blow off in private debt, record levels, and house prices. Well, when you're going to reverse that, or you can't borrow from the future anymore, then that's going to change. And that's why that sector is going to shrink dramatically. And I think the banks and the investment firms are going to split up again, because this is what's keeping this thing longer than in history. So in terms of work, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on there, but I think I'm of the belief, even though I'm bearish, I think this century it's the end of capitalism, because this information revolution at the end of this century, Kurzweil believes in 75 years we'll develop the replicator. And if you look at the converging technologies, there won't be a need. And with the shrinking populations in the developed world, that will only lead to a shortage of workers. And when the population shrinks, if you look at, and that means it's the empowerment of the individual. So this is the other theme of why I say it's the rise of the individual and decentralization. Now, in between that time, could be massive unemployment, double digits, 10% plus collectively, but I think there will be a shortage. And I think this robotics and AI and 3D printing is part of the solution.
Where does this leave something like the currencies? Talking to everyone from my own father to people who have done well in your demographic, Joe, over the years, about the importance of defending the value of the Canadian dollar on the global currency market. Even if we get all this stuff right, even if we do well with AI and these things come to pass, ultimately people who are relying, for example, on old age security and pensions and things of this nature rely on the dollar. We're, as you mentioned, now a nation of consumers as opposed to a nation of producers. And as a result, most of our stuff comes from the global market, which is priced obviously in USD. And so our currency weakness at the moment, if 72 cents, 73 cents, whatever it is, against the dollar has increased the cost for us significantly. These things are being reported in the newspapers as elbows up. People are not going to the United States anymore, when in the reality of the situation, the true sort of framing should be, we can't afford to go to the States. We're going to marine land instead or something. What do you make of the people in the older demos that are on old age security? What is going to be left for them? It's one thing to say healthcare, because eventually everyone ends up in the healthcare system. You may only go through that ringer once, God rest your soul after that, I guess. But everyone is going to take that money from the pension for some time, from their corporate pension for some time, old age security for some time. What becomes of these people? What becomes of these programs?
Oh, I think this is why they're trying to introduce income to replace all the pensions and so forth, right? To get rid of the welfare. I mean, what you do is, but when you bring in I think the plan should be guaranteed basic income replaces all the welfare and retirement and so forth, and people are guaranteed a basic. The problem is the politicians are going to abuse it. That's the concern. You get rid of everything else, and then you tax back those people who don't need it, right? You just make sure that I think there's going to be some kind of social safety net. There has to be to get through this, because the solution is that they're not going to do is they need to write down the debt. And you're going to, and I get pushed back on my feed. It says, well, they took out this loan, they should be responsible. I said, okay, if you just bail out the banks and not the public, you're going to, 1 million people, what? How many people lost their homes in the US? 10, 12 million?
Something like that.
We're 1/10? Yeah. So 1 million people losing their homes. What do you think? That won't cause a revolution? and right in the streets. So yeah, restructure the debt, keep them in the home, just structure to the percentage of the loan. The banks won't like it, but I don't know. Do we bail out the banks or we bail out the public, or a little bit of both? And I think you have to do a little bit of both. People, whether you disagree with it or not, or agree with it or not, that's understandable. But how do you fix it? You can't print. This is where I'm fundamentally different. You can't print within a credit bubble. Printing, says, well, they're going to print like Argentina. Yeah, but remember, Argentina interest rates went to 50, 70%. What would that do to the mortgage market?
Was it good or bad? Is it good or bad for the mortgage market? Can you help me out there?
It just would collapse it. And this is where it's just as ridiculous. And I just want to just go on podcasts and be the guy says, no, hyperinflation is impossible in a credit-based economy where everybody's leveraged to real estate. They forget that part. Or it's the other argument. The immigration. What about the deaths? So I'm going to post the latest data. I have one projecting from. I've got data going back as far as possible because I'm a student of Longwaves. But if you go to the future, the thing is, there's an exponential growth in deaths. That is supply. And demographics is part of the picture. You can't always just focus on immigration. And even somebody posted something with Grok, and they said, well, it's immigration is cyclical. I guarantee it's going to go to zero. And deaths, you can't stop, and it's growing exponentially, and it doesn't peak until 2050. So there's your supply. But that's okay, because then real estate will be seen as a place to live. And not an investment vehicle. Maybe those people who fix up places and bring it back to its nominal value will make money in real estate, but I just don't see the price appreciation. So this hyperinflation printing is impossible within a credit-based economy dependent on record low interest rates, which the central banks don't control. And the other thing is as I said before, is this. Don't forget about the exponential, the baby boomers dying off. They're now 77 starting. So, this is the point. And this is why, and I'll post it tomorrow, this is why it's running away from the exponential growth curve. And this is supply. And this is, they had all these models about projecting where prices were going to go. They're incorrect. Demographics and Dent is the one who brought this up, because he not only saw the collapse in real estate in Japan, but it didn't recover, and it took so long, and it was the demographics, because all the supply was coming on. So what people are doing is migrating to, and I think this is why you're getting a resumption after 21-year bear market of real estate prices.
Okay, I mean, this is all great. That leads me to a sort of a natural next question. And we saw this recently, obviously in Canada. We had an election here, a surprise Liberal, I don't want to say landslide, but obviously, compared to where they were 3 months before the election, a rebound in victory has not been seen in a modern democracy in some time. And a lot of people point to the gaps, Joe, between the needs and wants of the boomers, who are very politically active, very politically engaged, and in my opinion, low information when compared to their counterparts in the younger demographics. The Twitter sphere guys, the Bitcoin guys, even the FIRE guys in their 30s and 40s and 50s, who look at things and go, there's a problem here. We can't keep doing this. Can't keep doing this with economic policy. Can't keep doing this with printing. We can't have a prime minister that wants to separate operational and investment and pretend that only balancing one is the only thing that matters. The question then becomes, you said that capitalism is going to die this century. I think democracy has failed. That's my personal view. It's failed as a political system and a social cohesion method. I suspect that many people my age feel the same way. And you see this in things like quiet quitting, opting out, no one starting families, no one dating, rise in drugs and substance abuse, decreases in social spending and social engagement. Where do you come down on this? What does the Longwave say about these staple pillar social and political systems that really did bring us from the Stone Age to the modern age. On the back of democracy and open debate, we did all this. And it seems now that, as you kind of mentioned earlier, touched on earlier, at some point, everyone realizes they can vote themselves a little bit of someone else's money and the game ends. Where are we on stuff like democracies and just generally political systems around the world starting to fray?
Oh, that's a great question. And yeah, it's very clear on the long wave. So what's coming to an end is centralization in all the systems. So it's a reset. It's not only a monetary reset, but it's just a way of conducting business. So we're seeing the end, because it's really clear. If you've seen, I think you've seen the chart and posted it, but if you GDP per capita, has gone nowhere since Trudeau came into power. When Trudeau came into power, and the only thing that masked economic growth was the housing bubble. So people are thinking that they're wealthy. Once that unwinds, that will cause a revolution. So we're seeing the end of central power. That's clear. And we're seeing the economic ramifications, where we're seeing now Alberta wanted to separate. And Quebec, who's the beneficiary of the tax revenue from Alberta, who's not represented legally. The system has to change. But this is what happens. It will go till it can't, and then it collapses. And that's what we're going through. So yes, I agree. And obviously we can see that the elected officials are not working in the best interests of the collective or for Canadians. How did we get to a point where we can run permanent deficits, twin deficits? Remember, Japan was running twin surpluses in '89, and their government was able to soften the blow, so to speak. But now their end game is coming, and interest rates are rising. So it's really clear. So the progression is clear. First, let me track to educate some people.
Sure.
Previous credit bubbles in 1873 and 1834 were technology bubbles that burst and that caused economic winters. This time, it's a private debt bubble in real estate that's going to cause economic winter. This is where the leverage is. Here's the thing, though. Those technologies were productive. And this is where I changed my view about economics, because after what happened to me, I learned from value investors where to allocate capital. And one of the things which was interesting was I looked at bubbles as dangerous, but I saw technology bubbles as a sign of a revolution to come. So if you look at that, was the canal mania in 1830. In 1870, it was electric and steel. These innovations were disruptive to the economy. In 29, it was automobiles and oil, and these were radio. These are technologies that were disruptive in a positive way, and it changed it. So when you see these AI bubbles or 3D printing bubbles or solar bubbles, from a long way perspective, they're dangerous, and it's best that you don't participate them, but you benefit from these technologies. So this is how it was easy, because when I studied long waves, I was like, where's the fifth wave? And when the sovereign individual came out, Bitcoin wasn't around, 3D printing wasn't around, the internet was just evolving. Cell phones were still pretty crude. So it was precedent in seeing that, we're going toward this. And then as we saw more and more things, and look at all the technology bubbles, AI, robotics, 3D printing, quantum computers.
Yeah.
Take a look at these are individual. Biotechnology, the most important, and stem cell revolution. These are all empowering the individual. Again, so what's the need for this big bureaucratic central power? And they know they're losing power. So they came out with a central bank digital currency, and they're trying to retain the power. But it's breaking apart because Alberta wants to go this way, and and Quebec might want to go this way, and the individuals are being, the millennials are being shortchanged. And I mean, my nephews are millennials, and they're two young guys, and they can't afford to buy a place, and they're frustrated. And I've let them know, like, look, history is just be patient, and you'll get that home for 10 cents on the dollar. I guarantee that. And people think I'm nuts again. Again, I've heard the arguments, but I've looked at every bubble since the tulip mania, and they all overshoot, and you'll be able to find bargains, right? And remember, real estate bubbles are always the most dangerous. Again, for your audience, you had the stock market collapse 29 to 32, but the reason for the severity of the downturn was the real estate bubble. And it was the leverage in real estate. It wasn't the stock market. Very few people have assets in the stock market, and it could drop 90%. Yeah, it'll disrupt the economy a little bit, like in 2000, but it'll continue to power. But it's real estate. And for some reason, we can't stop the public from leaving in what will be guaranteed a disruptive to the economy. I'm dumbfounded with this information revolution that is a million times bigger than the printing press, which was revolutionary in terms of accelerated human knowledge and empowerment, right? To the detriment of the church back in the 1500s. Now it's a detriment of governments. That's why they're trying to control it, because they're losing power. So the good news is that I believe that a direct democracy will come out of this. And we're going to validate and find ways. I mean, allowing 16-year-olds to, all about sustaining power. I mean, come on. So that's why I'm not so harsh. I know how bad it is. And people say, oh, they designed this is on purpose. No, they didn't. They just are greedy like everybody else. And they just went on further, and they're going to lose power. And everything that's happening has happened before, just on a bigger scale for Canada. That's all. Look, Alberta, it could be a manufacturing powerhouse, and if you get the politics right, because they have the resources, and the technology is there. They can produce everything Canada needs, because I believe I've seen some horizontal greens that can be done. I mean, producing food, and that is disruptive, and it's actually really good. It's more efficient. So there's so much coming down the pipeline. So that's the good news. So I believe it's the end of socialism, economics. Capitalism has one big long wave to go, and this will be the blow off, and this will be the biggest disruptor of our lives. And I don't know, what does it look like? I mean, think of the replicator. I'm going off of here, but how do you introduce the replicator into
the first person to get one is like, miles and miles ahead of the 10th person to get one. That's what makes the introduction of these technologies so difficult. There's a Cantillon effect, but not for money, for tech. And the gap between, it's not like having the first edition of Lotus on your laptop from 1994, okay? It's not like that anymore. It's the first guy to get the AI model that can build him something. The gap is so big now. So stuff like a replicator or some of the biotechs you're talking about, it's a dangerous thing to introduce, because it will drive the people who don't have it to madness so quickly.
Yeah, I don't know how you restructure the public around that. I mean, because the thing is, which is, there's a great book called Superabundance by Gail Pooley, and one thing I reading the book, and I was thinking about it, and I didn't realize the replicator solves two big issues. The world becomes abundant. We have access to everything, so it changes. Maybe this is then we go into the age of enlightenment, where we focus on ourselves and families, and there won't need to be more than 2 kids, but you just have a life of purpose, spiritual growth. I don't know what it looks like 100 years from now. It won't be around for it, but it also solves the pollution problem, because if you can replicate and just create things from matter and numbers, you can also then take care of the matter that we don't need and turn it back into nature. So it solves a lot of issues, but it disrupts those in power, and it takes power away from powerful elite countries and so forth. So that model is coming to an end. And to me, it's just obvious when you see Trump and Carney and this European Union. They're forcing it on us, and the people are pushing back, and it's not going to work. So it's going to fail. That's the good news. You don't have to force people to use AI or a computer or this thing, because it benefits them. So that's why, if you want to get away from the darkness, sometimes I know I'm guilty of it. If you want to focus on the good, focus on the technology that will be disruptive. And the simple model is the one that its marginal cost is falling faster than incomes. That means it'll be adopted by the public. So when this was $25,000, and now this is the latest, and it's only $1,000 or $2,000. Of course, almost any person can find a way to finance it or purchase it, and that's where we're headed. That's the good news. So this whole thing needs to collapse, but it will go in stages. And the key is, Joe, is real estate and watching its final peak. And that's now happening in the US, by the way. Now their real estate cycles peak. So the US was the last to roll over. Now it's rolling over. And that means we're going to have some severe crisis. The governments can't bail out the financial sector this time.
We had a couple of weeks ago, Stockwell Day. You must know him, eh?
Sorry, you're breaking up, Joey.
Do you know Stockwell Day?
Yes, of course.
So he was on the show about 2 weeks back, and we were talking about exactly what you just mentioned there, this control that's slipping from centralized powers. He called it Ottawa Laurentian elites. You're calling it sort of centralized democratic powers and centralized technologies. Everyone, whether you're a politician by stripe, a money manager by stripe, a realtor by stripe, Bitcoiner by stripe, no matter how many different silos you go into and talk to people in, everyone has this view of the Leviathan can't keep everyone in line anymore. It's too hard. And so now I think, in my view, what we're seeing is the Leviathan trying to, and this is Hobbes' Leviathan. Okay. There's no giant military machine, but the Leviathan really is trying to take the biggest players out of the public eye and make examples of them. We've seen this with guys like Trump. If you frame control retention and the chilling effect around what's happened to Trump in the last 8 years, 9 years, makes a lot more sense. This guy is an agent of chaos. They may agree with some things, disagree with some things, but at the end of the day, him having a seat at the table is a loss of control. The European Union, same thing. Countries who go against the immigration policy, who don't want to pay for pollution, that's a loss of control. They have to be made an example of. It has to be a giant fine. It has to be financial repercussions, economic sanctions. Russia doesn't want to play ball with NATO expanding to the Ukrainian border. Well, then you need to be invaded. You're not gonna do that. We're gonna sanction you. We're gonna take you off SWIFT. Everything is about control. And the sooner people realize that there is no shadowy figure pulling the strings, that the man behind the curtain truly does not exist, and everything you see around you, from the municipal level to the federal and provincial levels to the supranational level, is all just, I don't want to lose my grasp on the control that I have on the outcomes that benefit me. It's really that simple. And the long wave, like you always say, is the end of that control, whether they like it or not. So maybe the last thing we'll ask you here, Joe, things are coming, they're turning over, they're finishing now for the United States real estate market. I think last time we were on, I said, what should people be looking for in terms of signposts? Maybe this time, Joe, we'll talk about, if you're someone my age, we talked a bit about the boomers earlier. If you're a millennial who doesn't have a house yet, you're a Zoomer who doesn't have a house yet, we have a young audience. Give them some hope. Give them some things to look for, some ways to stay sane over the next 10, 15 years when it seems like things are getting more and more hopeless? It's darkest before the dawn, as they say. Give me some white pills here.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So about real estate, I'll tell you, the audience, what I tell my nephews. So should I buy or rent? Rent. Prices are going to fall, will fall. Now, by the way, if you own a place and it's paid for, I wouldn't suggest selling it because we don't know what's going to happen to the currency. So you want to own it, but just know it's going to be worth a lot less in the future if you're okay with it. Okay, if you're somebody young. Rent, why? Real estate prices will fall, and over time, it's going to cause the fall in rent prices, and you'll be able to rent at a cheaper price, and you won't be owning an asset that's losing its value. You can sleep at night because the deleveraging will be most. I've said over and over again, deleverage. Mm-hmm. Before the economy does, because once it does, it will force a lot of businesses and governments to deleverage. The second thing is to focus on building a community, some kind of community. What I mean by that is where you can support each other and get you through this difficult time, because you need to focus on what you can control, right? And the long wave is out of our control. Right? It's a social cycle, and it's just reflective of human nature and the different aspects of it. It's not a fixed cycle. This long wave is a lot of people being economic winter for 20, 25 years. But the thing is, when the criticisms came, I criticized it and I said, well, wait a sec, are they wrong, or this just has gone on longer? And then it was easy to figure out that they've extended it because they financialize it. And capitalism morphed into creditism. So the thing is, focus on what you can do and build a community. Where's the growth? Look at the industries. Again, on the other side, we're going to have a shortage of work, and we're going to have to go through robotics and AI. I'm not fearful of it. That's where the productivity is going to come from. And it'll be decentralized. So if you're looking at a business, probably wait, because you'll be able to buy places dirt cheap. And I think when the prices fall in factories and all that, to house and produce goods, services locally will be the trend nationally. That will be the national trend. And that will lay the groundwork for the next boom into the future. The third aspect is, how do you deal with the stress, with the change, right? And again, it's always still focusing on what you can control. You can't control the stupidity, authority cycle that is going to peak soon. They're going to lose power. The public will not take this. But you know what? It's creative destruction, as Schumpeter said, right? It works and it doesn't work simply because things change, and technology is the biggest disruptor to this whole thing. And that's why when we saw the internet and the growth from the 90s, we knew at that point that it was going to massively disrupt, and it has. And now robotics and AI, man, like I've always been an early adopter in this AI. You got to get on board. It's disruptive, but it's okay. It's a productivity hack. And I just want to pass on what I've learned. Build your own. It is that use the paid services, but teach it, and teach it what you want. And be careful. It does make errors, but I'm teaching it, and it's putting out great stuff for me. And it's taking, what would take me, I did the Elliott Wave for Toronto. It would have taken me years to get all the data. And I said, okay, find me all the data on Toronto real estate going back as far as possible. And I found all the data, and I checked the sources and all that. And it's a productivity hack that's off the roof. So get involved. And it's really to survive and prosper during economic winter. And I used the Kennedys as, a very powerful family. And that simply was because Joseph Kennedy saw the Great Depression coming, and he actually tripled his net worth during the Great Depression, where most people lost their net worth. So if you know what to do, you can do well. A word of warning: don't go around flashing your wealth and bragging. I learned that the hard way when I first called the first bubble in 2000, and I was ecstatic that after losing everything in 89, I saw the bubble and my clients did well, my business, and all the advisors were jealous and envious. So in 2008, 2012 came along and said, yeah, things are really bad, man. Oh, my clients, whatever. And I was doing fabulously well, right? There's just human nature doesn't change. So I advise my wealthy clients to, hey, get a cheap car. Don't start flashing your wealth and whatever you did well. The future included, we're going to be the early ones that are aware of what's coming. And when the masses awake to what you and I understand, it'll be too late for them. They'll be panicking and they'll be trying to salvage what's left of the system. And that system, politics will be the last thing to change in the end. But, it's great news. I mean, if you're young, you're going to see the most technological revolution in history. And if you take care of your health and look at stem cells and longevity, you could be, your generation probably will be around to see this replicator. And wow, that's a game changer to structure and society. I don't know how they do that, how you introduce that, but that's another point.
Joe, I always like having you on. You're welcome, of course, anytime you like. And, for people who are listening for the first time to Joe tonight, you can find him at the Econ Longwave on Twitter. But what else are you up to these days, Joe? Give people a few places they can read you, see you, hear you. The floor's all yours, buddy.
Yeah, really. Because, one of the things I've discovered this thing, you want to share it. You just don't want to benefit yourself. For wealthy, but I've made it so the average person, I have a Substack account, and that Substack account that's been growing and it's really taken off now. And it's really to help people allocate capital. So people want to know what to do, including financial advisors, because these balance funds. So it's a combination of what to do with the capital. That is it. And it's a model. And you work with your advisor, and the model's done extremely well, even though since it's launched 2 years ago, it's 50% cash. That I can't tell people. And it changes. So what to do with the capital. I'm not an advisor anymore, so it has to be general. But that's where they can get the information. From me, it's to help them with Twitter. And I think I might start doing videos again, just short ones, just to educate people from a long wave perspective, because I know our audience, Joey, will be growing exponentially once the financial crisis hits. Then a lot of people will be coming out. But the most important thing I want to leave it with people here, the long wave just gives you the framework of what's happening. The crisis is not an accident. It wasn't preordained, whatever. It's just repeating. And unfortunately, Kondratev died for his suggestion that capitalism is going to come back bigger and stronger. That was his penalty. He was a communist economist. So that's good news for the future. And yeah, Substack if you want on Twitter. Contact me. And with Joey, I'd love it because you're aware. And it's hard to educate an interviewer or talk to somebody where you got to start from the beginning, because the long wave is not an easy subject to articulate. Let me tell you that.
For people who haven't read Joe's stuff, I highly recommend it. The Econ Longwave on Twitter is a great place to start. The Kondratyev's Longwave theory. I think it goes by another name too, right, Joe? What is the other name it goes by?
Well, it's the Kondratev cycle.
Kondratev cycle. There we go.
Kondratev. It's after Nikolai Kondratev. So the reason why we mention his name is just in honor of him looking at the capitalist system that was over there, but he was living in communism, and he came up with this thesis, and it blew our mind because he realized it's a social cycle, but we call it the economic long wave to simplify it. So Kondratiev, but it's just in honor of him. of his work as he was shocked by the gulags of Stalin. Capitalism will come back bigger and stronger after its collapse. He did forecast a collapse, but his greatest call was actually would come back stronger, and he was right.
Yeah, he was. Okay, I'll put all that stuff in the show notes. People who are listening, watching, thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next time.